Hey there, it's Carly with the Expat Focus podcast. Following Brexit and amid the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, is living and working in the United Kingdom as attractive as it used to be? In the past 2 years, we've seen a mass exodus of many expats from the countries they were calling home. The number of visas granted to Aussies to live and work in the UK reportedly dropped 74% in 2020. That same year, the UK issued 48% fewer youth mobility and temporary worker visas to Kiwis. But are New Zealanders and Australians beginning to come back to the UK? And what opportunities are they finding when they arrive? Clint Heiner is the manager and director of Kiwis in London, a very popular Facebook group set up to help New Zealanders and Australians to find jobs, places to live, and socialise. He's joining me in this episode to share his thoughts. Before we begin, you should know that this interview was recorded late last year in 2021, just before the current Omicron wave of COVID. Clint, I was thinking back to the first time we met. It was in a pub in London leading up to Christmas. It was a Christmas jumper party of some kind. And that was my introduction to yourself and to Kiwis in London. Can you tell me about this Kiwis in London community, which is so synonymous, not just with New Zealanders, but also Australians when they moved to the UK?
Wow, I remember that moment. Actually, it was one of our first Kiwis in London Christmas parties we'd had. That one there was only about a couple of hundred came that night. It was one of our first ones. Since then, it's been going on, apart from obviously COVID last year, where 14,100, I just said 1,400 people come along. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah, on a bigger
Needed
scale.
to get a bigger pub.
We did. We've got like rather large venues and Ernos and Clapham Grand, things like that now. So they can just keep us in there. But yeah, Kiwis in London's been growing and growing since then. And only because, why? Because people are coming to London, they're going to get a little lost and confused and they want to find a friendly face or even a friendly accent, even if it sounds a bit Australian as well. It's all good. And we help people get jobs, get flats, and get drunk all at the same time. All at the same time.
And was Kiwis in London born out of your experience moving to the UK and needing that support network?
Oh yeah, I didn't really have any friends here. I had a friend who got deported about a month before I arrived, so I managed to stay on his sister's floor. And I didn't really know much about anything, to be honest. Social media wasn't around then. The internet was, but all you had really was the TNT magazine and then go for it, really. I didn't really kind of plug myself into any community at all.
Mm-hmm. And when you were setting up in London, when you were kicking off Kiwis in London, in your experience, what were Australians and New Zealanders moving to the UK to do profession-wise?
Kiwis London's 10 years old now. So around about 10 years ago, I mean, Kiwis and Aussies were doing the traditional thing, but moving away from just pure hospitality. I mean, that was the bread and butter for a long time. The Kiwis and Aussies would get a place in Earl's Court and work
Shepherd's
in a pub.
Bush.
Sherboo, exactly, yeah, and work for like the typical terribly low wages and share rooms and all go together on holiday on a van tour. That's all changed, you know. Back then, I guess it was more people moving away from hospitality, doing a bit more kind of professional things. There's plenty of Kiwi lawyers in the UK, you know, and accountants as well. And then on top of that, office work. It's kind of like across the whole board. You're going to find Kiwis and Aussies doing almost anything.
Yeah, it's really interesting. When I moved, I was 28, so I was a bit older than all of the Australians I kind of met when I first moved over. And they were all really focused on their working holiday. So they were sharing flats, working low-wage hospitality jobs just to fund their next Europe trip. And for me, I was aiming that little bit higher for an office job to stay or move into a new profession. So you're right, it really is a mixed bag of Aussies just after some adventure and don't really care how they earn their coin or where they rest their head at night. And those that are looking for a bit of a higher standard of living and a higher standard of working.
Oh, I tell you what, I've noticed a huge difference now between now and back then. Dare I say the word, we were more feral. And Kiwis and Aussies, we were, but that was the good times because people would go out and think, okay, I've got 20 quid. What are we going to do tonight? We're going to try and have a big night on what we can do. And people would be learning less, but trying to look after the environment better with them food wise, or they'll go traveling on the cheapest possible coin they could. These days it's so different. It's kind of frightening how different it is now. But
When you say
wow.
different, is it because people have higher standards or?
Yeah.
Okay.
And, in the last few years, like Aussie and New Zealand got rich,
Right.
and rich countries, obviously people have higher standards, they have more expectations, they want to do more, but not even more, they want to do things but comfortably. They don't want to be in the dorm rooms anymore. The number of travel companies have told me now people want private rooms when they're on travel now rather than dorm rooms. I mean,
Yeah.
there's things like that. People want a little bit more for their money now. They want to pay a bit more. They want to do a bit more. They don't want to be doing the same things we used to be doing 10 years ago or more, 15 years ago.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I remember just being blown away by the Sainsbury's meal deal.
Oh, the
I could get
sandwiches.
I could
Ooh.
get a really good sandwich and a packet of crisps and a drink for like a couple of quid, and I lived on those things.
Yeah, I know. The Tesco sandwiches had me going for a while too. I urgent gym after all
But it's, I
that.
mean, and I think it's as you get older too, you're less interested in slumming it in a dorm or even glamping, and you want to do things a little bit more luxuriously.
The young ones are wanting this too now, though.
Oh, really?
They don't want to get up at 4 a.m. to watch the All Blacks play or the Aussies play at 4 a.m. at a pub anymore. They're going to sit at home on their phones and legally stream the rugby from their phones and do that. And sit home and be respectable, whereas we'd be all lining up outside the Shepherd's
Back
Bush
in
walkabout.
our day, yeah.
Back in our day, I know. I should get a rocking chair. I know, but it's the whole, people used to line up, Aussies and Kiwis used to line up outside the walkabout in Cebu for like, an hour or 2 hours on a early
On a game
cold
day.
morning. Go in, get a snake bite and a pie, and then watch the
Snake
rugby.
bites, man.
And that's it, but this doesn't happen anymore. I've been struggling to get 50 people to a rugby game in the morning now. I mean,
That shift has happened like roughly in the last 2 years. And that's coincided with a couple of big things. We've had Brexit, and
oh yeah.
we've also had this, virus sweeping the world. So
Oh
I'm
yeah.
really curious. I mean, obviously Aussies and Kiwis not necessarily directly affected by Brexit, but I want to start there. What did you notice in the lead up to and since Brexit when it comes to the appeal of the UK for Australians and New Zealanders?
I find it really confusing that New Zealanders and Australians would be any way emotionally involved or invested in Brexit, to be honest, because I looked at the map and New Zealand and Australia seem to be quite far away from Europe. And I say that, but it kind of baffles me how so many people are invested in Brexit, where Brexit's a very British thing, and it should be, and obviously for the Europeans as well, but for Commonwealth citizens like New Zealanders and Australians, I don't see why they would be worried by it at all, because nothing changes. Nothing changes for New Zealanders and Australians unless they're working for a company perhaps which might have an office in Europe, or there is a travel involved which might affect their visa. But even so, New Zealanders and Australian passports have nothing to do with the Great British, in the visa scheme. So for me, I did see a little bit of talk about it. People wondering what's going to happen. Will I be able to go to Europe on my New Zealand passport on a British visa? Yes. It's silly questions, but that's what I'm here for. There's no such thing as a silly question.
Well, on
Uh,
my side, I would say it's not so silly, because in my
yes.
situation, I was living and working in the UK, but I was on a Maltese passport, European passport,
Yes.
not British or a visa. So when Brexit happened, my company came to me and said, well, are you going to apply for settled status in order to stay in the UK? And at the point, I was about to move to France anyway. And the feeling I was getting was that my life was going to be way easier if I moved to mainland Europe than if I tried to stay in the UK and claim settled status as a European. And I'm sure there's a percentage of Australians and New Zealanders who were in that same situation on European visas through, their parents or grandparents, and having to decide, well, should we just go home or apply to remain in the UK?
Yeah, I mean, the settled status scheme did get picked up by a lot of people. In fact, it was very interesting how that worked out numbers-wise. It seemed like a lot more people applied for it than they thought. Oh, typical. I find British bureaucracy to be so out of touch sometimes. I'm not surprised. I encourage everybody who had the opportunity to have who had a European visa or whatever, to go for it, the settled status, because it was very easy. Although in the beginning it wasn't so easy. Apparently you can only do it on an Android but not an iPhone.
I remember that. Yeah,
like, that's so
technological
British.
glitches.
Such a British thing to do. But it seemed quite simple, and I hope that people did take advantage of it. I believe they did.
Amid the talk of Brexit and the fact that so many European workers the UK relied on would be less interested in coming to work in the UK, there was discussions about opening freedom of movement, like the old EU-UK situation, for New Zealanders and Australians. What happened there? Because there was a lot of excitement around it for a while.
Kanza, they called it. Canadian, Australia, New Zealand, UK. Kanzak. I don't know how you pronounce it. Either way, there was a talk about it, but it was because they wanted to have this free movement between Canada, New Zealand, Australia, Europe, UK, I should say. Terrible idea. And I know you're going, what? But I think it's a terrible idea. And I'll tell you what, there's no way New Zealanders are going to vote ever to have free movement with another country other than Australia. They're not going to want English or Canadians to come in with the free rights as the Australians do already. They've voted against it the last 2 or 3 years.
Right, because it would have to be reciprocal.
Oh, it'd have to be. And that's right, it had to be reciprocal. And on top of that, I mean, dare I say it, and it sounds controversial, but why just the white countries in the UK, in the Commonwealth? I mean, why is that? The biggest English-speaking country in the world is India. Why aren't they involved?
Right.
What about South Africa? Although they're kind of their own problem as their own. So, I mean, so there's always kind of situations where, why would the UK be seen, optics-wise, to be opening up just to the whiter countries in the Commonwealth and get free and free
I didn't
movement?
realize it was selective amongst Commonwealth countries.
Sounds like it, It's all the and for me, I was like, well, it sounds like a nice idea, but I don't see how it's going to work. I don't think Australians also would be. I don't know. They might be happy to have free movements.
A giant influx of Brits into Australia wanting the better weather, then no one would stay in the UK.
That could happen. Yeah, I know. And it'll be great. But, they have changed visas. Visas have changed a little bit. You kind of mentioned a little bit about free movement. But I'm sure you're aware the Australians signed free trade with the UK,
yes.
Which involved also enhancements to the working holiday scheme for Australians, where instead of it being 2 years, you get 3 years for the Tier 5 youth mobility, and you can apply now to 35 years old. It used to be to 31. So I think it's quite similar to the Canadian working holiday scheme now, I think, where you can get to 35 and you can apply. Now, this is always good news, because when I see that, Australia getting this, I'm like, bloody well done, Aussie. Where Australia goes, New Zealand follows.
New Zealand follows, yeah.
You think so? But we just signed our free trade agreement about less than a month ago with the UK, and the Tier 5 changes were not built into it.
Not the same, right?
Not the same. We don't have any of that yet. Yeah, I say yes. I sent a very I sent a nice, polite email to the High Commission guys who were talking about how wonderful it was, going, hey guys, where's the visa changes? And they were like, well, it's going to be discussed in future talks. I'm like, oh no. When it's bureaucrat talked for whatever, mate.
Could take a few years. Yeah.
It could. I've got my timer set, so I'm going to remind them every 6 months. But and so I think hopefully soon New Zealand will get those enhancements as well. But I think that with the Australian enhancements, I think it's going to be a really good thing for us. more people will come over because they know they'll have 3 years instead of 2 years. They can apply when they're older, so older people can come over and whatever they do. And it will be great. I'm hoping anyway. It'll definitely bring the crowds back to the UK.
Bringing them back. And that's kind of where I want to go next. So we discussed Brexit and
Yes.
free trade agreements and how that's affected visas for Aussies and Kiwis wanting to live and work in the UK and vice versa. We had COVID happen. I know for Australia, they've just recently opened up the borders again, but for the majority of the last, 18 months, you haven't been allowed to leave Australia without a really compelling reason. So that's really put the brakes on Aussies heading to the UK. And a lot of Aussies at that time, I know a lot of friends that I had living in London at one point just decided, you know what? Don't know when COVID's going to end. Our life experience in the UK and Europe this is not what we came here for. This is not how we expected to live. So we're going home. Have you seen in the Kiwis in London community that similar thinking over the course of the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, this whole situation was awful for everybody. I felt so much for the Australians because you actually had to have a compelling reason to leave. Whereas the Kiwis, on the other hand, they kind of wanted to leave, but they were like, well, maybe we won't be able to get back. I'm like, no, you're not going to come back anyway, I said. But no, they
to New Zealand?
I mean that in a nice way, but and so yeah, we did see this a lot of people leaving. The exodus was pretty big, but at the time, the New Zealand government told us to stay where you were because they weren't going to do any mercy flights. Of course not, and it was fine. But we did lose a huge number of our community, and they were concerned. But it's been what now 18 so months now, and New Zealand's having a bit of a dose of reality, dare we say, and Kiwis are like, you know what, MIQ is slowly changing to 7 days to 14, whatever.
That's the Kiwi quarantine protocol.
Manage something in quarantine, whatever, which is, it worked well, although it's controversial, very controversial. But people are now thinking, well, okay, we're going to come. And I'm getting more and more Aussies and Kiwis kicking tires at the moment on my page, asking lots of questions about what to do when they arrive. It's amazing, though, what their perception is of the UK from listening to media back home.
Tell me.
Yeah,
I'm so curious.
It seems to be that everyone in the UK is dying in holes now from this hideous virus and contagion. From what we're hearing, when kids are saying to their parents, "I'm coming to the UK," the parents are like, "Shock horror." But why? It's so dangerous over there. You could die. No way. And the media breathlessly counting one case here, one case there, locking everything down. It's kind of created a climate of absolute panic and hysteria. I mean, don't get me wrong, COVID's not very nice, and
it is still quite prevalent in the UK.
Very
there
much.
are,
in Europe as well.
As we get into winter. Yeah, absolutely. Is that concern valid? Do you think should it stop Australians and New Zealanders who have been planning to move abroad, or should it be delaying them further?
No, come. Just come. Honestly, and it's different because the strategies that were done by New Zealand and Australian governments were elimination, which is an impossible thing to do. It's a pandemic. I've been saying since the very beginning, you cannot hide from a pandemic. Getting back to that point, though, do I think Kiwis and Aussies should come over? I say absolutely. There's so much opportunity. It's crazy.
And the opportunity is where I want to go next. So we know after Brexit, a lot of European workers who would be in certain sectors of the UK workforce are just not there anymore.
Yeah.
Exacerbated, I'm sure, by the pandemic. And also I'm sure to a degree from the Aussies and Kiwis that decided, and other nationalities like South Africans that decided to go home. I've seen the headlines of, thousands of workers short in the trucking industry, heavy haulage, just getting goods to and from the UK, in the farming sector, hospitality. Where else are you hearing that the UK is crying out for workers?
Yeah, I feel like it's. I think the UK is getting the worst of it because there is a worldwide kind of procurement problem at the moment. But the UK have a problem because, as you say, people went home, and I think it was more exasperated by the pandemic when people had to go home. It's easier to go home to Europe than it is to go back to New Zealand and Australia, as you all know. So trucking, retail, hospitality. Even offices, people just went because some people just left home, like they actually left the UK, left their flat, which was had to pay rent on, just buggered off. So there's like everything is where where there's shortages.
I even read an article in the Financial Review saying that there's an unprecedented demand for Australian accountants in the UK, and
I posted that.
Maybe I saw it from your LinkedIn.
No, it wasn't from me. No,
but I even read that they're so desperate for accountants, they're even willing to hire the accountants remotely. So
yep, absolutely.
You could technically work for a UK accounting firm doing UK accounting from Australia.
Yeah, I'm sure there's many tax reasons why
you couldn't do that. But
yeah, as an accountant, they should probably know.
Makes
that.
a good story, though.
It is. It's true, and they're not only that; they're actually coming to me. The recruiters are coming to me and say, "Hey, we want Aussies, we want Kiwis. We will Zoom them, and for interviews, and even so, we'll probably hire them on the spot."
Wow. So, I mean, I know the advice to me in 2013 was, tell the recruiters you're coming, but don't worry, you won't have interviews till you get on the ground anyway. Yeah. Now they're really getting the jump.
They want, and it's across the board. Professionals, especially. You read the article. Aussie accountants, and I kind of squeeze it in for Kiwis as well. With lawyers, accountants, you name it, they are just people are fizzing at the moment. They want them. You know, we have that natural ability that we speak English. Even their accents, but you know, and that's what they want. But yeah, the professional sectors are just they're desperate. They're desperate. It's them, and then the other end, you've got people wanting the tradies, Kiwis, the Aussie tradies, and they are even more in demand. You know, they're desperate just for. You know, I get every day. Do you have a carpenter? No, I don't have any carpenters. You know, there's no one here. There's no one here. So yeah, there's plenty of professions across the board who are just they are needed now, not next week, not next year, now.
So recruiters are chomping at the bit to get Aussies and Kiwis, you know, locked into a job and over to the UK. Does that mean there's a lot of negotiation power when it comes to salaries? Because I know, you know, when I came in 2013, the glory days of, you know, what you could earn in the UK were a little bit over for Australians and New Zealanders in terms of the exchange rate and all that sort of thing. And I was a little bit shocked at even like an office salary for my level was pretty low. Is that still the case, or are things getting a little bit more interesting again on that front?
Oh yeah, it's definitely interesting times because anybody now can negotiate. I think it's a perfect time to negotiate. If it's like something that you really want, I mean, they're going to want you. They really want you at the moment. So it's really about being a bit smart about it. Don't be too much of a dick. But really, but you know, on the other hand, though, if you're dealing with a recruitment agency, then by all means, you really should be haggling as hard as you can because they have their margins and they're quite nice. So you can definitely try that. But even other employers as well. I know that at a lower scale, when I'm dealing with tradies, recruitments, carpenters, whatever, they are upping their rates quite a bit. That's just for that. And officers as well. They were willing to negotiate. Talking about this across the board, across the world, though, this whole the great resignation thing is now a talking point in recruitment now, and people are they're looking for more money. And people are going, well, okay, we're going to have to do it. And the UK was addicted to cheap labor for such a long time, which I found very disrespectful.
I mean, I was working for £6.90 an hour doing up to 12-hour shifts in hotels. Yeah, is that even a thing that Aussies and Kiwis will consider these days?
No, I was on 420 in a bar. Tell me about it. Yeah, it's crazy. And back, but the thing is though, you know, obviously with everything being more expensive now, it's probably not a go. but people can live off it. It's just really rough, It's Tesco's value meals every day, and the
That's
five
why
p
I was eating them.
5p cans of baked beans. You can't go wrong. But yeah, so no, you can actually earn a bit more now. Definitely earn a bit more. It's there. The availability is there. We're going through the biggest job boom. Well, people needed boom for 70 years now. So there is so much opportunity to try and squeeze a little bit more out of people because it can be done. Absolutely.
Okay, so if you want to move to the UK as an Australian or a New Zealander, you can definitely scratch hospo jobs off your list unless you really want to answer the call for the truck drivers. You probably don't have to do that either.
Good money.
What about the other traditional elements that you need to sort out when you come over? Like, I was shocked at the cost of renting in London, and I very quickly realized it was just not realistic for me to ever expect that I could live by myself and remain relatively central. What's the deal with the rental market, for example? Are you still, going to need to flat up with 5 other people when you move to London, or is there a lot of availability now in rentals and are prices down?
Wow, I mean, isn't that sort of thing that people want to live with other people? I mean, I don't know. I mean, it is the market is the same, but I say that in a way that landlords are quite desperate to fill their rooms. It was last year I noticed that landlords were willing to bypass a deposit, or give you a month free. Little bits of bribery to get you into their
I mean,
places.
I had Australian friends that had to pay 6 months rent up front
Yeah.
when they moved into their flat in London. You can
Uh,
definitely not have to do that anymore.
there's probably not. In some respects, you might still be asked by some landlords, but if they're not desperate. But at the moment, I mean, it's slowly picking up now, the flatting world again. Kiwis London, we have a weekly kind of flatting board, and it's been there forever. And it's before COVID, it was out of control. There was so much rooms, the prices were getting higher and higher and higher. But because people had higher standards, they're moving away from living with 4 other people. They wanted to live with 1 other person, and they wanted to live in leafy Clapham, and they wanted to do this, they wanted to do that. And so, well, if you want to afford things, you've got to realize that London isn't just the Kiwi and Australian areas. There are a lot of places you can go to, and for reasonable money. I was living in zone 3 or 4 in Northfields, all places, and I was paying $500 a month for a gigantic place with 3 or 4 other people, and it was very comfortable.
And I have to say, we've been speaking a lot about London, but it's also the case that people move to the UK and don't live and work in London. There are other parts.
Yeah. I've heard
parts
this.
of the UK that exist.
I've heard of these people as well, and there are plenty of opportunities around the UK as well. People sometimes, if they move out of London or they don't come to London, they're kind of like evangelists. They're like, you must come to Manchester; it's the greatest place, or Glasgow is the greatest place in the world. They'll do all this stuff because I think they're hiding the fact they need to come. But no, they're not really. I'm sure there are places in the UK are very nice, and they're cheaper than London, although slowly will get more expensive as they gentrify themselves. But yeah, there are other places, and other places do have plenty of work as well. And traveling from these cities isn't that much of a problem either. So I mean, everything's in the UK anyway. For goodness sake, 68 million people here. Can't go wrong, really, can we?
I find the way you've been speaking about the UK and the opportunity and just come, is so interesting, because I guess living here through Brexit, the vote, the transition, the leaving, and where I'm sitting here in France, people are not very interested in going to the UK anymore and just see it as over there, it's so much harder now. It's like, whatever, why would you bother? But you really don't have that same attitude about the UK and opportunities, and that it's still worth it.
I'm positive. I'm very annoyingly.
I mean, you're a very optimistic seeming person. So there's this.
Realistically, though, at the end of the day, Brexit really only started 11 months ago. So it's always going to be a lot. Oh, come on, it's going to be a heck of a lot of bumps and turns and twists. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's what they wanted. And it will get better eventually. COVID kind of ruined everything anyway for everybody. So we've not really actually seen the world through the eyes of a non-pandemic. kind of point
Post
of view.
Brexit. Yeah, we're still
Yeah,
waiting
exactly.
to see what that's
Apocalypse.
like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The Armageddon isn't really here. So no, we're not really seeing the reality of anything around anywhere in the world. So and people that come, when they get off the plane and they realize in the UK and they're in London, they're looking at. I was going to look at Big Ben, but you can't even see Big Ben. It's covered in scaffolding. But you go look at. I won't even say Buckingham Palace because it's a bit underrated. But when you look at other things, you're going to realize, oh my God, I'm actually here, and it's not that bad. Things are moving on. Everything's opening up. I mean, it's really exciting now. This is the place with so many cool things you can do, and people just they love it. They realize, what was I worried about? What was I scared about? Why did I believe my grandmother when she said I was going to die in the first 2 days because of COVID? People are getting the realization, actually isn't that bad here. I mean, the weather's rubbish. Come on. Who comes to the UK for the weather? I did.
So, Clint, just finally,
Yeah.
obviously you're quite invested. You've been running Kiwis in London for a good part of a decade or more. You're a strong advocate for Kiwis and Aussies to come and live and work in the United Kingdom. What's your best piece of advice for those who have been on the fence or who are plotting out a move at the moment and want to make sure they make the most of their opportunities there?
YOLO. I hate that word, but it so works out. It's so true. What are you going to do all your life if you're not going to travel? I mean, and the UK is such a perfect setting off point. If you don't like it, just travel. For goodness sakes, what you're going to do at home. You're going to be to have the same life in your country no matter what. So why not give it a go? It's not that expensive, and you just do it. Just do it. I mean, it's all I can say really, because it's your mind will be blown by what you see in Europe. Just do it. Damn it. Just do it.
That's it for today. If you like what we do, don't forget to subscribe to Expat Focus on YouTube or your favourite podcast app. Be sure to check out our other episodes. We cover all aspects of expat life all over the world. And if there's something or someone you'd love to hear on the show, let us know on social media. To get your free moving guides and other useful resources, head to expatfocus.com.